And I will introduce Katrina Locke, the County Sustainability and Resilience Program Manager.
Hi, good evening, Kelly. And just before we get started, I just wanted to remind everybody to put yourself on mute, please, because there is some background noise. And for the speakers as they move forward, if you can put yourself on mute, if you can't, we can put you on mute and you can unmute yourself. So just wanted to mention that. So with that said, as Kelly mentioned, welcome to the Save Our Springs and Rivers education series, and thank you for joining local experts as they discuss the challenges and benefits of instituting low impact development strategies into our structures and community design. And if we have any elected officials on the call, I would like to thank them for their service to our community. The Save Our Springs and Rivers series is a cooperative project that's been funded in part, as Kelly mentioned, by the United States Environmental Protection Agency through a Department of Environmental Protection non-point source pollution grant. The focus of those grant initiatives are to provide residents with information about the sources of non-point source pollution that are negatively impacting Blue Spring and actions we can all take to contribute towards the solutions. Those actions are actions that can be replicated throughout the county to make positive impacts on our water quality. You may have seen our Time to Change the Way We Go education campaign, which was a marketing campaign designed to provide the facts about the impacts of septic tank nutrient pollution. Or attended or heard about one of our Save Our Springs and Rivers water quality academies, which were designed to develop ambassadors equipped with knowledge about water quality issues and solutions. Throughout these initiatives, we talk about how we need to work together as a community. Today, we're going to talk about low impact development, an approach to land development or redevelopment that works with nature to manage stormwater as close to its source as possible. Through these workshops, we hope to enhance an understanding of the value of low impact development and green infrastructure as a way to prevent pollution from entering our surface and groundwater bodies, and as a way to provide us with a buffer for storm and flooding conditions. Low impact development isn't a new concept, but we have started talking about it more because of nutrient pollution and because of how it can be incorporated into development to reduce the impacts of flooding from storm surge and sea level rise. Reducing non-point source pollution and being more resilient is about us all working together as a community across jurisdictional boundaries towards solutions that reduce our impacts on our environment. So as you participate in the forum, please think about how the information you learn about low impact development tonight can be used to promote healthy communities. And as I mentioned, this forum is part of a series, and if you've missed any of the other forums, they are available through the Volusia County Environmental Management YouTube channel. And if you subscribe to the channel and click on the notifications, you'll get information about any of our future forums or webinars, and I'll put a link in the chat for that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn back over to Kelly McGee to introduce our guests for the webinar tonight.
Another point I would like to mention that this is a publicly noticed virtual meeting, but there will not be any policy decisions that will be made during this meeting. This forum is interesting. Our title is Selling Low Impact Development, a forum for realtors, lenders, owners, and buyers. And we've had a series of low impact development workshops really since March. March was our very first one. And we had over 110 attendees. And we discussed stormwater and using stormwater, managing our wastewater in a way that it becomes a resource as opposed to a waste product. And one of the questions that came up as a result of that workshop was, well, what do realtors think? You know, realtors have, you know, feet on the ground. They've got their finger on the pulse of what's going on in our community. And why don't we hear from them? And so many of our virtual meetings so far have talked about different facets and technical aspects of low impact development. Tonight, we're going to have some of that. We're also going to really be listening to everyone to try to get feedback so that we as a whole community can start speaking with maybe even more effective verbiage. And so with that, we'll go ahead and get started with our speakers. We're very fortunate. I'm going to introduce both speakers right now, and then Dr. Wendy Anderson will start, and then we will tag Betsey. So Dr. Wendy Anderson is a professor with Stetson University. She's also the elected chair of the Volusia Soil and Water Conservation District. Dr. Anderson is an environmental scientist, and her areas of expertise include nutrient flow through ecosystems, strategies for maintaining biodiversity, and promoting sustainable businesses and communities. Tonight, she's going to discuss ways to promote the economic benefits of landscapes that improve water treatment, promote clean water, and encourage water conservation. And then we also have Betsey Lindley with RE/MAX Signature. Betsey's originally from Detroit, Michigan, and she moved here to Ormond Beach in 1971. And after a successful career with the Daytona Beach News Journal, she started commercial real estate in 2005 and residential in 2010. And we are so excited that you've agreed to be a speaker. And we do have several different realtors also joining us tonight on the webinar, and we have a really great participation list. So with that, Dr.
Thank you, Kelly. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Is that okay? No, sorry. Get back to the beginning. Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, I'm really excited to be doing this tonight. This is something that we've been talking about for a while, certainly since March when we did the first forum on LID, and I made an assertion that night when I was the keynote speaker that we could actually sell homes in neighborhoods like this for a higher price. And I still believe that's true. I'm really interested in having the conversation towards the end of this session with the other realtors and people who are in the home selling and buying industry to kind of hear what they think about that as well. Certainly Betsey is going to have a lot to share with us on that. But I would just like to start by saying that obviously we're in a huge real estate boom. The economy is doing kind of surprisingly well despite COVID. And new construction is, of course, just going through the roof. So what we're seeing is that, buyers are basically taking whatever they can get their hands on as quickly as they can. And of course, developers and builders are bringing new properties online also as quickly as they can, even given the constraints that they're feeling in materials and supply chains. So the problem though is that it seems like so much of what we're seeing in their development proposals is often unimaginative, and it's also kind of predicated on the idea that they're going to clear cut entire sites, mass grade them, and basically plug in as many houses as they can, and then lay a bunch of sod with 1 3-inch tree in the right of way, and in a few shuffle areas, and a crepe myrtle up by the front door. So we're being told that this is what buyers want, and I would just like to challenge that. I don't think that most buyers are looking for that. It's just that that's what's available, so that's what they're buying. And so I think that the opportunity that we have right now is to perhaps have a conversation about how we can get buyers to demand better, and what is the role that realtors can play in helping build that demand from the buyers. And so anyway, that's where I hope we can go in this conversation tonight. As Katrina and Kelly both said, we have had a whole series the last couple of weeks on LID principles and practices. Most of those other sessions have focused more on the whys and the hows of LID. They've gone more into the details of what LID principles actually look like in practice. But I think our conversation can really be more about how to sell it. And I guess another sort of spin here is that our land development codes and our comp plans and our smart growth plans, they all have language in them that requires certain pieces and parts of this. But regulation is one thing. I think it's even more exciting when the market forces are actually there to say, this is what we're building because this is what the buyers want. So
would you like me to share the video that we took?
Maybe not.
Okay.
Sure thing.
Yeah, now that I've thought about it some more, Kelly and I did a series of videos a couple of weekends ago. They were really fun. Maybe if we have time at the end, you can throw it in there. But yeah, so as I've put together my presentation, I realize I actually have a lot in here, so I'm not sure we want to take the time. Okay, so tonight I think we'll focus more on site level features and landscape solutions, and acknowledge that green building features of the homes themselves are also important: energy efficiency, water conservation inside the house, as well as renewable energy appliances. But that's not going to be the focus on our conversation tonight. So I want to start by just kind of introducing a couple of big ideas. One is this idea of biophilia, which is a term that was coined by E.O. Wilson, a very famous biologist from Harvard, who's, I don't know, I'm guessing in his 80s or 90s now. But the idea of biophilia is that humans have a tendency to interact, to have a desire to interact or be closely associated with other forms of life and nature at large. And then Kelly actually did a very interesting kind of series a couple of years ago with the author Wallace Nichols, the author of Blue Mind. And the idea of Blue Mind, this book, is that being near, in, on, or underwater can make you happier, healthier, and feel more connected, and make you better at what you do. So this is all kind of pretty obvious stuff. People like to live near nature. We know this, but we don't seem to be building with that idea in mind. Most urban planners we know that access to green space, greenways and trails, public gathering places, things that get people out of their homes and interacting with others is better for overall health and well-being. It builds community, it stimulates cultural and economic exchange, and it really is better all around. So what we've seen, despite all of this kind of basic understanding of how humans just are, right? Since World War II, we have continued to build these suburban homes, each with their own big lawns in ways with monoculture carpets and monoculture carpets of sod. And they then require, constant watering, fertilizing, pesticide applications, and then spending your entire weekend mowing. And so why do we do that? Why do we do that? What is this weird obsession that we have with keeping the perfect green carpet of grass? So again, this whole workshop will actually challenge those assumptions. But of course, these workshops are also getting us to think very carefully about the impact that way of maintaining a lawn and maintaining a neighborhood, the impact that has on our waterways. This is a slide that Mike Ulrich from the county shared with us a week or two ago in thinking about some major infrastructure upgrades we need to make at the county level. But this slide just happened to note in the sort of turquoise section of the pie charts here that urban turf grass fertilizer is a significant source of nutrients that is polluting Volusia Blue Spring and Gemini Springs. And we know across the state of Florida that it is polluting our coastal waterways, and our rivers. So, so clearly this is a problem we need to solve, and suburban lawns are a big part of the problem. So how can we do things differently in a way that protects the environment, protects our waterways, and also gives people what they, at their very core, actually want? So the alternatives that we've been discussing are really meant to ultimately protect, I'm going to say original in quotes here, the original natural areas. And I don't mean original like, you know, hundreds of thousands of years ago, but you know, what they were before, you know, modern humans really came in and started converting them. Protect the original natural areas, and then also to intentionally recreate new functioning ecosystems. So 3 terms that we kind of use, not interchangeably, they're each distinct, but they have a lot of overlapping principles, are low impact development, which we often just call LID. And LID really is about an integration of hard engineering solutions and soft engineering solutions. I'll go through a couple more slides that give a few examples of this, but it's moving us away from just the hard engineering solutions and helping us see how different uses of vegetation can actually slow down water as it moves across the landscape, filter the nutrients out of that water, filter other pollutants out, and actually reduce the risks of flooding along the way as those natural ecosystems absorb the water and and actually pull a lot of that water up into the atmosphere through evapotranspiration. Green infrastructure is a closely related concept. It's often used to talk more about, rather than the engineering kind of at the front end of a development, the green infrastructure are things that get put in place to actually mitigate ongoing nutrient loading in the neighborhood going forward. And then Florida-friendly landscape principles are both a palette of plants, native plants, as well as other plants that are well suited to the climate and soils of Florida, that can be spec'd for landscapes, but they also include practices. So practices that reduce and minimize fertilizer applications, pesticides, and irrigation needs. So again, the whole concept of FFL, Florida-friendly landscaping, is right plant, right place. And you can put, a native plant in the wrong place and it's not going to work out really well. So, so it's really kind of understanding the different habitats that you have in your lawn or in your community, and in choosing the plants that are going to thrive there with minimal maintenance. Okay, so just a little bit more about these principles, particularly LID principles. And over here on the right-hand side, I have some diagrams that show different scales: lot scale, kind of parkway scale, community-wide scale. And again, the principles here are really about conserving natural areas, enhancing biodiversity of the landscapes, mitigating pollutants through plants and soils, controlling stormwater volume in a sequence that slows the water flow down, spreads it out, and allows it to soak in to the ground and ultimately to recharge the aquifer. The benefits, of course, are that we're supporting a broader array of biodiversity, and we're increasing that recharge into the aquifer even as we clean it. So those are really the benefits that we see LID providing environmentally. So, but we can also go beyond that and talk about the benefits to people. And I think when we're talking about how do we sell this, it really has to be about the benefits to the buyer and the people who are going to live in these communities. So low impact development, green infrastructure, Florida-friendly landscaping do improve quality of life for the people who live in neighborhoods that have these priorities. It gives those people access to mature trees, into natural areas. And the benefits to those people are that they have opportunities for exercise and stress reduction, cleaner air and water, noise reduction, and local shade and regional cooling. We actually see that when trees are left, when whole native ecosystems are left in place, that the entire region stays cooler than when most of that has been wiped out and you have urban heat island effects kind of kicking in. So, and of course it's good for wildlife, and, and they're pretty. So, so everybody deserves this. A really interesting article came out in the New York Times just a few weeks ago at the end of June that actually did sort of side-by-side analyses of several major cities across the US that showed that neighborhoods with higher median incomes were more likely to have trees preserved in them than neighborhoods with much lower median incomes. And yet everybody deserves this. Everybody deserves trees, everybody deserves access to nature. And we need to make sure that this doesn't become, just another thing that divides the wealthy from the less wealthy in this country. Everybody should have a chance at this. If you have a chance later, you can look up this article. It's a really interactive article. You can kind of scroll around and see lots of different interesting things, but I won't go there right now. Another benefit, though, is that there are actual operational savings for both the homeowner as well as whoever maintains the neighborhood. So that might be an HOA, if it's a neighborhood that's organized around a homeowners association, and each of the residents pay dues. There are some significant operational savings that can be enjoyed through this. And the obvious stuff is through water and fertilizer use and pesticide applications. I mean, those all cost money. If you're using the right plant in the right place, you won't have to replace materials quite as often. The plants will actually survive the conditions that they're growing in. It also costs money sometimes to deal with stormwater when it's flooding, and then also when those stormwaters are running into ponds and bringing nutrients with them. You then have problems with algal blooms in those ponds, and then you have to spend money treating the ponds to keep those algae or cyanobacterial blooms under control. So neighborhoods that have made these kinds of commitments and that are designed from the beginning with these features can actually maintain lower HOA dues. In my particular neighborhood, I live in Victoria Park in DeLand, which is a very large community. It has, when it's built out, it will have over 3,700 homes. And so in our neighborhood, we spend over $2 million on our landscape maintenance contract, and we spend about $750,000 a year for our reclaimed water, which comes up to irrigate most of our neighborhood. So that's a lot of money. If we can actually start prioritizing a lot of these practices, we could actually perhaps reduce our HOA dues, or at least keep our HOA dues from increasing as other expenses creep in. Also, of course, for individual homeowners, the ability to spend less on fertilizers, irrigation, and maintenance obviously is a benefit to homeowners. And then, we also see when we have mature trees over houses that it reduces the cooling costs because you have shading. And then, of course, again, when the whole neighborhood has mature trees and you get, a regional cooling effect, that also keeps the whole temperature down, so you don't have to spend as much energy cooling. And I think we all know that having a mature landscape and a landscape that is operating in all of these ways, contributes to higher resale values as well. Okay, so finally, not finally, just another big point is in a neighborhood that has a lot of LID features, it often means that there are preserved green spaces, there's trails that give access to natural areas for walking and biking. Oftentimes those trails often connect to nearby commercial centers, either commercial centers that are part of the neighborhood itself or other commercial centers part of the city. And that gets people out of their cars, out of their houses, and actually interacting with each other and building that sense of community. So in this context, a question that I have for you for later is this sort of conundrum about clustered development, versus developments where each home is on a slightly larger lot and the houses are more spread out. Having a clustered development, the benefits of that are that the houses are closer, you're more likely to know your neighbors, you're more likely to get out of your own lawn and go out to those common green spaces and interact with people. And those common green spaces are shared and jointly maintained. But of course, sometimes there are downsides to being in a clustered development where, where maybe people just don't want to live that close to each other. I guess I would take that even a step further and say, we're starting to see more and more developments proposing more multifamily units. And so, even in a lot of our planned urban developments, we're seeing kind of a mix of single family homes of various lot sizes and multifamily units. And, and so I guess I would say, is it kind of an extreme version of LID to preserve as much green space as possible and really pack the people who are living there into as high a density as possible in the smallest area? Again, that's a question that I think we can really drill down into later. Okay, so we know that people will pay premiums for views of water, views of nature, and and access to it. So you can look at lots of different studies that that will give you a variety of numbers, but having views of water or access to water can increase a property's resale value by or sale value from anywhere from 5 to 100% or more. And and of course, this all depends on how how saturated the market is with those kinds of premiums. So if every single home in the neighborhood has access to it, then of course you don't have to pay more for it because they all have it. But but certainly in places where where it's kind of a rarity to get access to that, people do in fact pay quite a bit more. Access to trails, same thing, maybe not as as pricey as access to water, but certainly anywhere from 2 to 20% more to have access to either hiking and biking trails into natural areas or biking trails into urban districts. I was actually, this is a little side note, I was at the West Volusia Chamber of Commerce, what was it, Morning Octane event a few weeks ago. And I was actually there wearing a different hat. I was there representing the St. Johns River to Sea Loop Alliance, which advocates for and promotes the 5-county 260-mile biking trail around that is really centered in Volusia County. And so, I was talking about all the things that we do. And then as we kind of moved around the room and other people introduced themselves, Sherry Simmons from DeBerry stood up and said, we have a really wonderful partnership with the St. Johns River to Sea Loop because DeBerry has become, I think, like a, the most bike-friendly community in Florida or something like that. They're really branding their city around this. Well, what was also interesting in that same meeting was that there were several realtors there, and they also, when they stood up to introduce themselves, kind of reached back, to talk about trails and bicycles, and said, we find that it's a lot easier to sell homes when they are within a mile of the Springs to Springs Trail or any of our other bike trails. And so, again, those are just anecdotes, and I would love to hear the stories that you all have, that either confirm or, or perhaps contradict that when we get into our discussion a little bit later. Of course, access to specialty gardens, whether that's food production gardens, pollinator gardens, other gardens where people might walk and find serenity, or or special things to explore. People also like to have access to those other kinds of parks and to preserves. The target market for these kinds of things are everybody. Basically everybody. Young families want this. Families want to get outside with their kids. They want to go explore with their kids. Professional singles and couples, if they have time when they're not working, they want to get out and go, jogging on a trail or cycling or something. Active 55 and up adults. Florida has so many, certainly Volusia County has so many neighborhoods that are targeting that older adult market. And yet, these adults are looking for opportunities to explore. And the particular photo I'm showing here, again, is from my own neighborhood. It's from the Victoria Gardens section of Victoria Park. It's a Coulter Homes development now, a Crestwind development. And based on the original design plans of this neighborhood from 22 years ago, we have preserved 400 acres of longleaf pine forest and wetlands. It's a beautiful area, and not in the hot summer months, but in the other 9 months out of the year, we have residents who are, longtime retired biologists who actually take dozens and dozens of people on guided tours through these areas and point out the gopher tortoises and the birds. There's bald eagles and egrets and all the little songbirds and stuff, and then lots and lots of wildflowers, and people dig it. I mean, they really enjoy this. I'm not old enough to live over there, but I sometimes sneak over there and join their tours just because I like learning about it too. And I also just kind of like the energy. These people are really excited about getting out and learning about the ecosystems that they're living right next to. So, so I think the point is everybody loves this. Everybody wants this. I will admit too, that occasionally we hear on Nextdoor, you all know what Nextdoor is, we hear that people are worried that there's a snake in their backyard, or there's a bear that they sighted, or there's coyotes that are moving around. Like, yeah, that's right. This is their habitat that we're living in. But I think people get used to it. They might be a little bit nervous about it when they first move in, if they're coming from, really urban areas, but eventually they begin to realize that this is one of the exciting things about living in an area with access to nature. So how do we brand this? So, whether it's a neighborhood that already exists or a new neighborhood that's being developed, branding is a big part of it. And, and this is where the realtors really become, a big part of the effort. So, you start by branding at the entrance. What is it about the entrance that says you're coming into someplace different? And in the picture that I chose for the upper right corner, I don't even remember where that's from. But what I loved about this picture is that the palm trees are not over pruned, that they actually have their full sphere of fronds and are being allowed to, to have a natural shape. That's a key that maybe this neighborhood is being treated a little bit differently. But really, if there's a sales center where home buyers might be going to learn more about the neighborhood, the sales center becomes an opportunity to tell that story, to actually have displays and features within there that highlight why this neighborhood is different. This neighborhood is managing its stormwater differently. This neighborhood is protecting our springs and rivers. This neighborhood is using native landscaping to attract wildlife and support biodiversity. There are a lot of buyers that would probably get super excited about that. The amenity centers really are a place to remind the residents once they've moved in that in fact they have moved into a special place, and that they have really a part of the responsibility to keep it special. So, so those spaces are really important places for creating and maintaining that brand. I guess I would say that it's the interior designers of those spaces who have to get on board telling the story, if in fact the story is true. Other communications, of course, whether that's brochures, the website, videos and commercials that are made, they can all take the opportunity to create that brand. And of course, you all, the realtors who are selling the properties, I mean, this is where it gets super exciting. I mean, I don't always tell my realtors that I am, who I am, that I'm an environmental science professor or whatever. But as soon as I do, they start pointing out to me, oh, well, you'll be excited about this, or you'll be excited about that. And in fact, I am. I mean, yeah, maybe I'm kind of an unusual buyer, but I don't think so. So anyway, you all really have that opportunity to kind of build that story. And then of course, people who live there, they tell their friends tell their friends, and so on and so on. So just to go over a couple of interesting examples besides the ones I've already mentioned and shown pictures of. A little earlier, I was showing some pictures from Victoria Park where I live, which does have, like I mentioned, over 400 acres of consolidated preserve, but also several other protected wetlands and preserves kind of dotted throughout the neighborhood. We have several other environmental features in our neighborhood. We use reclaimed water for irrigation. We've been doing that for basically from the beginning for 20 years before it was the norm across the county. We don't have a lot of the sort of soft engineering features that LID really promotes. And so, we're kind of, we're kind of in that direction, but not as, as far along as we could. LID really was established kind of as a design principle probably 20 to 25 years ago. So maybe when Victoria Park was being developed, it hadn't really taken hold yet. But some of our newer developments like Florida Days over in New Smyrna Beach, several of the photos I've kind of peppered throughout have come from Florida Days. I think Florida Days has really done it well. And I happened to go in there a few times last year to visit a friend. And it literally, again, as soon as I drove through the entrance, I knew something was different. And, and it was that there was native landscaping everywhere. There were no curbs on the roads. And, and so water just sheets right off the very simple roads into these beautiful natural areas. And then the home lots, which aren't packed in very tight, they have little lawns, so a little bit of sod, but a drought tolerant sod. And then the natural vegetation is just left, pretty close in to the houses. They're really beautiful. But Margaritaville, latitudes at Margaritaville over in Daytona, people like to pick on them. Even people in the environmental community like to pick on them. Maybe there's good reason, but they've made some efforts. They really have. I had a chance to go in there one time, well, a few times last year before we all sort of, got locked down with COVID. And I was in there actually giving some workshops to their residents on environmental issues in Volusia County. But while I was in there, I would just kind of poke around, just go take a look, see what it's like behind the gate. And I was impressed, actually. Minto has done a really good job of protecting wetlands, of preserving a lot of the natural areas. Of course, they've had to fill some in. I mean, this is just, what you have to do when you put in this level of density. But they've preserved an awful lot of green space, and they have hiking trails throughout it. Their amenity centers are telling the story, and it's working. It's, again, it's not perfect, but they've done they've made some pretty good efforts. And then their homes themselves have a lot of green features. They're energy efficient, they're water efficient. They have teeny tiny little lawns that barely need any water. And so they've really kind of gone above and beyond the basics. And so, again, they're not perfect, and I will probably get a little bit of heat from people in the environmental community for praising them. But I think they've made a good effort, and so it's worth noting. Avalon Park in Orlando, and of course we've got an Avalon Park that's coming online in Daytona. In the Daytona area, they basically build them as villages, as small cities. But the Avalon Park in Daytona also has several of these features, lots of preserved green spaces, a town center that is a walkable distance from basically anywhere within the community, and natural wetlands that have been preserved. And it's adjacent, if you look at the aerial view over here, it's adjacent to a very large preserve park, the Hal Scott Regional Preserve and Park. And that also comes with hiking trails that are accessible from the neighborhood. So, so this is, again, it's an example of clustered development where a lot of green space has been preserved. Again, their LID infrastructure may not be quite as aggressive as, as I would like. Maybe they haven't left quite as much kind of bioswales and rows of trees in between the houses, but they've done some of that. And certainly all of these impervious areas do drain into broader wetland areas, not just rectangular stormwater ponds. A final thought is that HOA covenants, rules, and regulations, this is just kind of a side note. These get written from the beginning. When development plans are being established, the articles of declaration and covenants get written in from the beginning. And we, in addition to the standard HOA chapters, chapter 720, we have other Florida statutes that actually protect homeowners' rights to use Florida-friendly landscaping and other things that would allow homeowners to individually kind of push towards these goals. But what we really need to see is entire developments really embracing these and then writing those kinds of principles into the governing documents. So homeowners know that they don't have to maintain a perfect carpet of St. Augustine grass, that they can actually do some more interesting things with native plants or Florida-friendly plants, that they can reduce their fertilizer and irrigation needs. And so, I think that this is something that, when we start looking at the entire sequence from the beginning from the beginning of a development even being conceived to being, designed, planned, moved through the process of approval, writing the covenants and rules, getting those houses sold, the whole process needs to kind of bring these principles, these LID principles and FFL principles to the foreground and let it become the norm. And everybody has to be telling that story. We need the developers' attorneys telling this story in city commission meetings. We need planning boards demanding it. We need this to show up every step of the way. So I'm going to stop there. I kind of went through that pretty fast, but I wanted to save enough time for Betsey. And these are the topics I would love to discuss after Betsey is done. What do you hear your buyers asking for? What do you see them responding to when they encounter cool things like this in neighborhoods? What are they afraid of? How do you feel? How do they feel about clustered developments? How much influence do you feel you have as a realtor over what your buyers are going to value? And do you think you have the power to create and enhance the market demand? So, so those are the questions I have, and I would love to have this discussion later. So I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you so much, Wendy. And we might ask you to reshare that presentation and maybe hold on that last screen as our discussion moves forward, because I think it's a great reminder for us of the questions that we're hoping to talk about. So in fact, Betsey, please take it away. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're so glad that you're here and can share all of your expertise with us. And so can you just sort of share your thoughts and perspective?
Okay, Kelly, thanks so much for having me. Wendy, nice to meet you. And thanks everybody for being out there. I hope you guys will chat and pipe in. I had a little talk earlier today with Kelly to ask if she thought I should mention a few things. I've only been in real estate about 16 years, but I've been working with realtors since 1977. So I've heard the stories through the years. And I love what Wendy, I feel educated hearing Wendy's talk. And we're always wanting to learn. My basic thing that I want to say is that I wish that we never had anything space cleared ever again. But you guys all know that it's a part of the developers and the builders and their bottom line. I mean, it's all about greed, but it's all about people wanting to make money. But years and years ago, we had subdivisions in our area that were developed like the Trails and Timber Creek. And, with private developers that aren't really all about the money, they save all the trees and they make beautiful areas. And like Wendy, when you were talking about Florida days, I mean, that is so beautiful, but it comes at a huge premium. Margaritaville, they've done a lot of green stuff, but it comes at a huge premium for a very small space house. I mean, they've really built something special that's worth that extra money. But again, it all comes down to dollars and cents. But what I wanted to talk about is I just want to tell you, like, my experience when I'm selling homes. I work with a lot of people that are in their, say, 40s, 50s, 60s, and they all want water. If they can afford water, they want water and they want it to be clean. And that's what they like about our area. But the foundational thing is that the people that do come here and buy here, that are coming from out of town, have always come here their whole life. They've come here to visit their grandparents. They came here on spring break. I hear that story over and over, that they're tied to this area. There's a reason they're moving to our area. And so the clean water is like really key to people wanting to come here. And contrary to that is that they say, well, I was thinking I was going to move to the West Coast, but then I heard about red tide, so I'm not going there. So it's important for us to keep this initiative on clean water and, you know, keeping the area is healthy with the water situation. So, but I shared this thing with Kelly earlier, and I think she giggled. I don't know that I can hear everybody else. They're muted to hear them giggle. But what a lot of people tell me is they want privacy. If they have the money, they want privacy around them. They want land. They don't want to be on top of each other. They don't like some of the newer developments because the houses are too close together. And then I drill them down a little. I'm really kind of bat nosy about that. Like, why? What are you looking for? You know, they'll want a pool, but they'll want it to be backed up to a lake or some woods. And I've drilled them down and they really want to go skinny dipping. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. They say, oh, you know, we don't want anybody to see us. But it's a lot of older hippies, not hippies, but people in their 60s and 70s. They want privacy. So, and economically, that's the difference between, if you've got enough money, you can afford the oceanfront and you can afford the riverfront, that type of thing. Wait a minute, great problem. Okay, so the other thing is, let me answer Melissa. Melissa, they also tell me they want to smoke pot in their backyard and they don't want their neighbors to see them doing that. And it just cracks me up every time because, you know, people like letting that kind of stuff loose. I'm like, really? It's kind of shocking, you know, when you see somebody that's 70 years old telling you that that's what they want to do, but they're retiring and they grew up in the 60s. So, you know, they want what they want. And can we enhance what they want? That was your last question on that last thing, Wendy. I'm like, I don't know if you can change what people want, but most people want what you're talking about, what's good for us by having all of that protection with the stormwater and less pollutants. We want a clean, safe environment, but it's a money thing. But now I've got a couple statistics. So Kelly, did you tell me I could bore them with the statistics? Okay, you're muted. I can see you going like this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I had Mark, our EO at the Realtor Association, and he gave me some numbers that we did oceanfront homes in 2020 last year. There was 845 oceanfront units. So that's homes and condominiums in the Daytona Beach market. And then he gave me a number of 165 units that were riverfront, but they were on the beach side. So in other words, you had the flanking the river and the ocean, and then a smaller number, a little smaller, 159 units were on the mainland on the river. So, and of the millions of dollars, we were talking about $275 million in oceanfront. And then in the riverfront beach side, 74 million. And then the riverfront mainland, 57 million. So you can see that the oceanfront, it pulls the biggest draw, the biggest amount of money coming into the area. And then I looked at, he gave me last year, so just 2020. So I went ahead and pulled the stats for January 1st of 2021 till today. And it looks like the trend is even more will be sold this year than last year. So the numbers are moving up. But the whole, I think what this is all about is how do we get people to pay the extra money to do what's right, like not having big expanses of lawn. I mean, I hear a lot of people coming here, they don't want to mow. I don't care how old they are. They don't need lawn anymore. But to get the builders to develop and keep the green space and put the house in the middle, you know, that's that extra money. I mean, are people willing to pay an extra $5,000 to $10,000 for their house to keep that? So it's one of those things where, do you have to legislate it so it can't happen, where they can't just clear space anymore? So there's, you know, you guys will be able to work this answer out, I'm sure of it. But I think that's about all I had to chit chat about before I let you open it up.
Great. Thank you so much. Wendy, would you be able to share your screen and put those questions back up? Thank you, Betsy. That was excellent.
Okay.
It's pretty staggering to know how much, how many units are being sold riverfront and oceanfront.
Right, but wait a minute, I have one more thing I wanted to say,
Sure.
because Wendy said something about what they want, and they want the privacy, they want the water, they want the trees, but what do they fear? I want to tell you a huge fear that people have, that I see all the time, and I'll show them a beautiful home or 5 beautiful homes, and if there are trees that are too close on the property, near the property, big trees, they are scared to death that those trees are going to come down during a hurricane, ruin their roof, kill them. They have this huge fear. So that's kind of surprising to me, because I've always lived around big trees and I've never really, I mean, I've seen them come down, but anyhow, it wouldn't be something that would deter me, but I cannot change people's minds if they don't want big trees nearby. Do you see?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm sure the others have heard that as well.
And, in fact, I think that we've been talking about what are people's goals, right? So what are they, what are we trying to achieve? And if you look at plans that are made from people who are people do water wise, right? For water conservation, people also do fire wise.
Mhm.
And so those developments typically don't have a lot of trees around the homes. We have some really good comments. I saw one from Miranda White, clean versus healthy estuaries or other systems is also a great topic of concern. So Betsy, from your perspective, like if someone is building or is looking to buy for like a water view
Mhm.
home, do you think that people make a distinction if there is a pond that looks clean or if it's natural?
Okay, I say I don't believe that people are too picky. Most people that live on the lake or a pond, it's a retention pond, but it's water. And if they keep it clean, which most subdivisions do, and they have birds and nature and fish, all that around, they love living on the little lakes or the ponds. I really don't think that they make a differentiation. Like, I don't think that somebody would leave Daytona if they were going to live in this area and go to DeLand to get a spring-fed lake. No, I think that just retention ponds, when they do them right, are beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, and we saw several. Wendy, do you want to chime in about the different retention ponds that you showed me? I mean, you took me on a whole tour of different sort of stormwater treatment ponds, and we had some really interesting perspectives from residents that we met along the way.
Sure. So, so again, Kelly and I did this really fun tour a couple of weekends ago. We started out at Stetson's aquatic center out on Lake Beresford, which is a site that actually features and educates about low impact development and green infrastructure solutions. So we started there looking at a stormwater pond that is, basically almost a recreated wetland. It's really quite beautiful now. But then we went back over to the Victoria Gardens section of Victoria Park. Victoria Park has a total of 43 or 45 stormwater ponds, quite a few. Some of them have had plantings around the pond edge from the very beginning, that are 20 years old, big bald cypress trees with all the knees, arrowroot and pickerel weed and other things that are very well established along the shoreline. And they're beautiful. And in fact, the pond that's been planted the longest is the pond that is right next to where the original model homes were in the gardens. Like, they wanted that pond to be as pretty as possible. And now it really is the most beautiful pond. I think those houses go for a real premium. Other ponds have plantings that have been added within the last 3 to 5 years. They're starting to look okay. Other ponds, the vast majority of the ponds in our neighborhood are mowed all the way to the edge. They don't have any native plantings around the edge, despite the fact that our city code requires it. And so and so what, I mean, one of the efforts we're making in this neighborhood, I'm on the HOA board, is to try to actually get those ponds planted with some shoreline plants that will actually do some of that filtering and buffering of nutrients. So those ponds stay cleaner. And also when those plants are growing along the edge, that becomes habitat for, for little aquatic critters, which then feed the fish. And so when people like to, go fishing, take their grandkids or their kids down to the fish at the pond, there's more fish because it's the fish that have had something to eat that's growing in those plants. So, the whole thing, has all these kind of myriad benefits, but yeah, so trying to actually get them planted after the fact is really complicated. Like, does the HOA pay for it? Is this something the developer was supposed to pay for? Yes, that's my answer on that. But but if they would just do it that way from the beginning, I think that those ponds would be prettier, they would function better, and people would actually pay even more to live next to them.
Mhm.
I think Melissa Lammers has her hand up.
Sure, Melissa.
Thank you. Great discussion. Full disclosure, before I started using my skills for the environment in Volusia County, I was a marketer and an advertiser. Betsy, we met a long time ago at a AdFed meeting, long, 2013, I think.
I know you, Melissa.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when we talk about marketing, we talk about benefits and attributes, the attributes that something has and the benefits of them. But an even further step back is not all consumers are looking for the same thing. And any marketer who thinks that they will prosper by trying to be all things to all people is going to fail. That's just a basic. Now, the realtors are in a tough position because they do not control the product 100%, but they do have to know how to sell the product. A great marketer matches a consumer's desires and needs to the product that they're either making or that they have for sale. And so I appreciate what Betsy's saying, and we're kind of in a chicken and egg situation, because when we have better developments, and I've been told by one developer that they put in the trees because they're required by law to do so. If they take out trees, they're required to put in trees, and then the homeowners who purchase the properties ask to have the trees taken out. So not that I would ever think Betsy wasn't telling the truth. I'm just confirming that she did.
Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome. So one of the, you get into some kind of more sophisticated marketing than we're talking about in this, but there are market segments. And I absolutely am certain there's a segment of people who are interested in being gentler and kinder to our earth. And we should be marketing to them in that way. And we can find around the United States multiple examples of communities that are marketing themselves as more environmentally friendly. Now, when we talk about the area where I live, Ormond by the Sea, where there's a lot of older homes, and we're the last great bargain beachside in the whole United States. So we get people coming down here who are counting their pennies and thrilled to have a second home, or thrilled to come to retire here. It's always been sort of a retiree area, except for during the space program. And those are one-off home sales. But when we're talking about developments, it's really important for the developer to have a good statement of who their ideal customer is. And it's not just who has the money to buy the product that they're making. And it would be great to see the realtors looped into that. I love this conversation, but really marketing is match needs and wants to the proper customer and get top dollar for it. That's what that's about. And there are people who want better developments. Thank you.
That's great. And we've got a couple other folks who've raised their hand, but I think that's a really good sort of segue into what do people expect from Florida? What's Florida's brand? Is it Disney? Is it NASA? Betsy, do you see a trend Other than, people have fond memories from their youth. I know that's my story. I I spent all my summers as a child in Daytona and roaming the beaches and rivers. And that's why I'm here, certainly. So do you have?
Well, when you mention like Disney and the Cape, St. Augustine, I mean, those all are within a very short drive from us, within an hour or less. But I don't think people come here because they want to be close to that. I think they come here. I mean, the way I brand Daytona, when people come here, they have a feeling that you don't get anywhere else because we don't have that trafficky feeling like you do in Orlando or Tampa or Jacksonville. We don't sit for 5 light changes. So somebody's engineering the traffic situation pretty good, but they designed, like the city of Port Orange is designed with 5 ways to get anywhere you want to get so that it isn't a big log jam. So I think they come here because of the ease of life here. It's in Volusia County, West Volusia, in Daytona area, Port Orange, Ormond, and even the outskirts. It's easy to live here. And I think that, also it's temperate. So as you get closer to the state line going north, the temperatures drop in the winter. And if you go south, they get hotter in the summer. You go into Orlando, it's just blazing hot. But having the beach and the river here, a lot of people come because they love the beach or they love to fish. And that's something that they want to be, whether they're in West Volusia. I used to be a bass fisherman when I was in my 20s. And, that was the most beautiful. I actually lived at Highland Park Fish Camp for a year back in the 80s. Yeah, isn't that fun? It's a place I saw the little baby alligators, little teeny tinies. And of course, mom was not too far away. And I was like, ooh. But anyhow, I do think that, it helps that Florida's got such interesting things, but I don't think they're moving here because of Disney. I think they vacation here because of Disney, but they don't really move to this Volusia County market other than a lot of water. I really think that it's because it's clean and easy. I don't know. Do the rest of y'all agree with me on that easy to live here compared to other counties in the area, in the state? I can't see heads nodding, Thank you, Wendy, for that head nod. So I think that's the draw, is that it's easy to live here.
I am a head nodder.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank
I'm trying to unmute. Okay, I get it. So yeah, I think that's true. People, obviously it's easier to live here than in Orange County or even Seminole or Osceola County. And I also agree that, yeah, people move here for the environment. Even if they don't identify as an environmentalist or a person who, puts that as one of their top priorities, Volusia County is still beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And we still have, we're an unusual county in that we still have that core, that environmental core, that wildlife corridor that we have very intentionally protected. We're creeping in on it, but we still have it protected. And, and whether people identify that as the reason they've moved here or not, I think that it's in the back of their minds. And if it were to cease to exist, if driving from Daytona to DeLand or from New Smyrna to DeLand were suddenly to become one solid, suburban development,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't be the same anymore. And people wouldn't flock here like they have been.
Okay, and then if you don't mind me, I just want to butt in and say education is another thing, because we've got universities and we've got, Stetson and we've got Embry-Riddle and Daytona State College, and we've got a lot of choices for education. And I think that's really high up on families moving here. With young children or young people moving here because of their education, and then they stay. So, we have a lot of people that come here for Palmer chiropractic. And so, once people see what the flavor of our communities is, they like it because I think it's kind. It's a kind place to live. So
That's a really good point. And I think that's something that the universities do really well is train the students to get good jobs, whether they're, local or far afield. And, all of those universities you mentioned, we also have University of Central Florida, Bethune-Cookman University. University of Florida even has a tie with the Marine Science Center here. Their veterinarians, take care of the animals at the Marine Science Center. So yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So that's
What about transportation? We've had some chat in the boxes about like how much is walkability? Does that chime in?
If you don't mind, I just want to say that when Wendy was talking earlier about having trails nearby, everybody loves having walking trails and lakes and all this nature. But if you look at the real estate, like say in New Smyrna Beach, and you look at, or New Smyrna, near Canal or near Flagler Avenue, especially Flagler Avenue, those prices have skyrocketed. People are paying $400 or $500 a square foot because they can walk to a restaurant. And when you're 70 or 75 years old and you want to be able to still bike ride and walk to the restaurant, and Ormond has got the same thing going on. So people are trying to move close to Granada and so all these houses that have sat and they were like deteriorating about 10 or 15 years ago, it all took off, and now it's just kaboomed into extremely desirable real estate. And of course, it's right in between the ocean and the river and close to all the water, but they love the restaurants, being able to get to the restaurants and the shops, and then the sense of community because they're building all these events, walking the streets. And I'm sure downtown DeLand has all that stuff that I always want to go to on like Friday nights. And that is huge, that sense of community and being able to walk to where you're eating or having a cocktail or a glass of wine.
Well, I'll just jump in and second that too. I mean, I tried to make some vague references to that in my remarks at the beginning, that, low impact development really focuses on stormwater management, but more broadly defined, whether we call it new urbanism or, or other labels for that, to have walkable and bikeable communities is a big part of what I would call low impact development, keeping the cars off the road, facilitating families, living with just one vehicle or zero vehicles at that. And, and certainly whether that's a historic district like Flagler Ave or for downtown DeLand, or whether it's a brand new development that's bringing in its own little commercial district that, it still has to be walkable. And, and people will pay a premium for that.
Right. Okay, I'm trying to look at this here. Let's see.
And I guess I wanted to go back while you're looking at questions. Melissa made a good point, as a marketing professional or past marketing professional, that you can't target everybody, but I guess I would just push back and say, but tell me somebody who doesn't want that.
Everybody wants what the most money can buy, but everybody can't have that. Right. So, I mean, where do you go? There's some, what I think is undesirable neighborhoods where they clear cut the trees, they built the houses really close or attached, and this construction wasn't that great. And so I hesitate to see my young families, but that's what they have to have if they want affordable, and they've got 3 kids and they need 3 or 4 bedrooms. Some of it's just not that great. But they don't have a choice because that's what they can afford, the entry level new home. But I want to read this question. Well, Melissa has put up here, how much does our tourism branding impact the home buyers, if at all? I think the tourism branding, by bringing the tourists here and then they decide, oh, I love this place, I want to move here, that happens all day, every day. But I don't think that the tourists impact people that live here. I know people that have lived here on the mainland side, not on the beach side, or in Westwood. They don't go to the beach. They don't, when there's special events going on, they're not impacted by truck week. They're not impacted by it because they don't go in that area. So I don't think that the tourism, it's definitely a domino effect because they come here and they like it and then they want to move here. But as far as it being maybe a negative, I don't think it is. I think we can be a little bit of a tourist destination as well as a great place to live. Does that answer that?
Yeah, it does. And I actually am not surprised by your answer, but it does seem at times a bit of a disconnect, a slogan about wide open fun and some of the repercussions we've seen about what that's attracted lately versus who we believe ourselves to be as a wider community. So I just wondered.
Okay.
Um, and there are a lot of questions here, and Wendy brought one up too. Doesn't everybody want that? No, you've got market segments, and what some of the questions here in the chat are about. You know, Betsy just talked about one segment, young families that need affordable housing, of which there's a great shortage. If we could make affordable clustered homes and areas for them where they could walk to parks with their kids, walk to the grocery store, have more of a sense of community, they might like that a great deal. But it requires having that product to offer them that also has that environmental sensitivity.
Right. Right.
Great. Miranda, did you want to ask your question? That's sort of a good lead in.
Oh,
I'm not sure if you can unmute. Oh, she can't use the audio right now. So, okay, so I'll just read your question. Betsy, do you see a distinct disparity between homebuyer attitudes and needs along the coastline versus inland towards the land?
okay. So what was the difference between the two?
So
Coastline-
a disparity between homebuyer attitudes and needs along the coastline versus inland towards the land.
I think that it's a different buyer, somebody that comes to West Volusia, or they don't, it's not like I'm either going to move here, I'm going to move there. I mean, you either move to West Volusia, and generally that's, I think, it has to do with maybe education or work. People move where they're going to move because of work, but they could be retiring, but they want to retire near families. You know, so different people have different reasons of why they want to live. I had some people look in West Volusia because they wanted to be close to Disney, because they were Disney nuts. And, you know, so everybody has a different reason why they want to be one place or another. And I'm looking here on Jenny saying they want a sanitized cartoon version of the scenery. You know, they want everything to be beautiful and they don't want the bugs or the snakes. That's hysterical to me, because really people say to me, I have people that don't live here and they say, well, I would never live in Florida because there's too many bugs. And I'm like, what bugs? I don't even know what they're talking about. You know, I've lived here 50 years and that would never keep me away from the beautiful state that we live in, you know, but I understand what she's saying about the no bugs and no snakes. If you have snakes, that's a good thing. Can't convince buyers of that though. Okay, was there other questions down there?
Well, that kind of goes to one of Wendy's questions, which is, you know, can you convince a buyer that, you know, that creatures are part of nature and, you know, having healthy water is, you know, you can be a birder and birders need to eat bugs and, you know, or do you think that people's minds are really set, or they're looking at, you know, other higher priorities?
No, I don't think anything like that would keep them away from living here. You know, the nature is, my daughter lives on a lake, on a retention pond, but it's a lake in the subdivision. And she discovered otters. She has 2 little otters that live in the lake. If you don't think that that lake hasn't brought her hours and hours of total entertainment with the birds carrying their nesting material across, and then they're, you know, tweeting and bringing food to babies, and they've got fish in their mouth, and you know, there's just so much just right out your window here in just lots of places that you live that anyhow.
And what about lawns? So do you see people, you know, a lot of people expect, you know, St. Augustine lawns. We've had some discussion in the chat about St. Augustine versus, you know, Bahia grass. And I know there are a lot of other, you know, options like clover or native plants like the sunshine mimosa. Any thoughts about lawns, like typical conventional lawns versus unconventional lawns?
You're making me feel really guilty for the expanse of lawn I have in the front. It's not that big. And And I just replanted with a lot of natural grasses, my front, bedding areas. I put the natural, but anyhow, so I'm kind of moving that away. But I don't know how you would steer people, we don't really steer anybody as far as like grasses and things like that, because if they're buying a used house, it's already got what it's got. It's got the bahia, or, sometimes people put the stones in, and that's kind of sorry, where it's just all stones and nothing green, instead of having grass because they don't want to mow, but then the weeds all come through. But, I don't know that we have any real say. And then the builders, of course, when they build a new home, give them whatever their standard thing is, or they pay extra for the St. Augustine. I mean, the real top notch thing is to have it not cleared out. Or even if they do, they use the natural plants to plant the yard and have no sod. But that's, I don't see that happening that much yet, but we'll get them to.
And Danny had a great little example. I don't know if you can unmute, but Jason Evans also with Stetson University has taught us about what he calls cues to care, right? There are subtle ways to cue people in, right? To like, this is a pathway. So it might be, we might have a border around one area. We might have a smaller patch of lawn. We might have pavers. But a butterfly garden, right? If you've got wildflowers for monarchs, at some point when they go to seed, they might look a little weedy, but they're probably growing monarchs. So, which is pretty cool.
Oh, I've got milkweed just propagating all around my yard, and it always thrills me to have the milkweed. And my girlfriend in New Smyrna, she lives out in the woods, had the little chrysalises, and she sent pictures. And then you won't believe this, she was walking outdoors one day and it was hatching, and she videoed the butterfly hatching out of the chrysalis. I was like, oh my gosh. But anyhow, I love that we have so much nature and all the,
Yeah, and Jenny's saying, certified wildlife habitat signs. I think, Wendy, don't you have something like that in your yard?
I just have one of those water conservation signs, but I kept it up for 2 weeks, and then I was afraid I was going to get a violation notice, so I'm going to take it down for a week, and then I'm going to put it back up. So it's going to play the game. But so Betsey, I'm listening to you with your passion, the way your eyes sparkle when you talk about the chrysalis and all that. Do you bring that excitement into your conversations with your clients? Are you pointing it out to them whether they're looking for it or not?
Oh yeah, no, I'm passionate when I'm with my customers and knowing what they want and helping them find it. And, and most people want good things. They want good things. They want to be in a good place. And yes, but, I kayak and I ride bikes on the paths here in Volusia County. I love being outdoors. And so I don't know whether it's me, but when people come to me, I'm always trying to help them find their way. If they're new to the area of where the most beautiful places are, you send them to Blue Springs, and you send them, to the beach at a certain spot. And, we got turtles that are, turtle nests everywhere. And it's a beautiful area. And yes, I'm very passionate about living here. I've been here 50 years. And there was a time when I was in my 30s where, 30 years ago, where I was thinking, I could move somewhere else and move near family, because I don't really have any family in this Volusia County area. And so I went all over the country looking where I would rather live to move from here. I was in Port Orange, and I was thinking about moving to Los Angeles, where I had one sister. And I went back to Ohio, where I'm from. And then I went to Atlanta. I had a sister there, and I went to Dallas, and everywhere I went, I was surprised at how beautiful our area is compared to everywhere else. And I don't know whether it's just home sweet home, but I've always been passionate about this area because it offers so much. There's so much we can do here. There's so much natural places to go, swimming in the springs, or, last summer I swam in the ocean. I got where I was like swimming a mile in the ocean and had the dolphin come up and go, "Oh, you're humans." And off they went. And I was like, oh, this is just like being in heaven. And you can't really do that in too many places. So, I'm passionate, Wendy.
Yeah, I just, and I think when I think about other realtors who might have similar passions, do they just keep those to themselves, or are they bringing that to the foreground in conversations with people who are moving in from out of town, and pointing out, like, in this neighborhood with this property, here's a special thing maybe you didn't notice, and and help sell that.
Mhm. Oh yeah, no, you know what? Realtors, as if I can just generalize a little bit, most of us are super, super gregarious. We love people and we want to help people. I mean, you wouldn't do this unless you want, because it's a lot of helping. And the TV shows make it look easy. Oh, let me show you this, let me show you that. But all you guys that are realtors here know that there's so much more to it. And it's really like carrying baby grand pianos on each shoulder, or maybe a stack of them, because all of your customers have these needs and concerns, and moving is really challenging. So when you can point out the enjoyment that you have when you're swimming in your new swimming pool here in Florida, and you look up and you see a bald eagle landing in the tree with a fish in its mouth, and when you can talk about stuff like that, all of that. And that's the other thing you pointed out, Wendy, in your talk, is how much emotionally and mentally, as well as physically, being in the nature does for people. Spending an hour outside every day just makes everything so much better. So, yeah, I think that all of us care about what our people like. Now, every now and then I'll meet somebody that doesn't like the outdoors, doesn't really like nature. They just want to sit in front of a computer screen maybe, and they're not an outdoorsy type person. I don't really hit it off with them very well, but I try really hard. And then I try to convince them to be more like I am. Do you know what I'm saying? You want to go for a walk? And they're like, no, I'll drive. And I'm like, okay, but you probably might enjoy a walk. Do you see what I'm saying? You try to rub off on people, but no, I think that most everybody does all they can to share our resources with their customers, for sure.
And that's something that Wendy, you shared with me as we were doing our little tour of the stormwater ponds, on the subtleties of the beauty of the edges of the stormwater pond, particularly that one that we visited. I think it was the Lincolnshire pond, where you could see the cypress tree with the cypress knees and the beautiful aquatic plants. And you pointed out to me that everything was very strategic. So they planted these cypress trees so that they were staggered between the homes. So every home had a clear view to the pond, and no matter what growth phase that tree was, they were never going to get a blocked view, right? Because we know if you block the view, people will chop down the vegetation. And so it was beautiful. And then you took me to a stormwater pond that had cypress trees planted, but the stormwater pond was managed completely differently. They mowed right to the edge. Those cypress knees were hacked down, literally cut off by those mower blades. And some of those edges were even sprayed, right, with herbicides. And so I think, yeah, but, and that's, so I guess my point is, when you can point out the beauty of, hey, here's what it is. And even if it's unsightly, like, you can still show, so there's still beauty here, like, because look at this cypress tree, it's absorbing 8,000 gallons of water a year, right? So there are still things that we can point out. And I love, Betsey, as always, your energy, because you can't help but get excited. When I talk to you, I can't help but my mood is elevated, and I thank you for doing what you do.
Okay, now let me tell you a little bit of a story, if I can, because I told Kelly I've got all these anecdotal stories here. But a few years back, and I don't remember what year it was, we had a freeze here, and we had like a 3-day freeze. And I don't know if you guys remember, but it was probably within the last maybe 10 or 15 years, and it was a heavy freeze. So I live on the creek, on Spruce Creek, and all the fish in the entire creek died. I mean, belly up. Dead fish everywhere. And so you know how we got saved from that. I mean, that would be a stinky place to live on the creek with all those dead fish. And who came in but the buzzards, the turkey buzzards came flying in, and there were hundreds and thousands of turkey buzzards. You would look out and it looked like the haunted mansion at Disney, like out in the cypress trees in the backyard, because there was hundreds of these buzzards sitting there after they'd gobbled up the fish. And the fishermen reported back that the fish bones were all that was left, like floating skeletons of fish, and the buzzards cleaned the entire creek up in just a matter of days. And so that, you know, first of all, when you say buzzard, you think, oh, yuck, you know, they sit around and eat roadkill, but they clean. It's like a natural vacuum cleaner in our area because they eat the roadkill and they ate the dead fish. So we didn't have a stinky backyard because of the buzzards. So that nature is such a, anyhow, it's all over. So, and we get to see it. So there you go.
Yeah. And, you know, some of these ponds, some of these stormwater ponds have fish in them because by natural ways, right? If you have a bald eagle, sometimes that eagle or that osprey drops that fish, right? And then they survive. I've seen that many times. I've talked to a lot of people that have literally had fish drop right on their driveway in front of them. We had a blue crab drop right on the driveway. But nature finds a way.
Kelly will point out that it takes a dropping of 2 fish to actually get a population started, but but certainly that happens. And yeah, but it's interesting, Betsy, because we've had some fish kills in our neighborhood too, probably when we're spraying too many pesticides, or maybe with too many nutrients run off and the algal blooms, you know, decompose and use up all the oxygen. But we get our fish kills, and then the turkey buzzards come, they clean it up, and then sometimes the turkey buzzards die because they ate the fish that were poisoned by the pesticides.
Oh,
So,
no.
you know, so not to sort of turn your happy story into something negative, but it kind of brings home, you know, the point that if we have landscapes that don't require all that stuff, you know, we can actually have these ecosystems thriving and not creating like poison food chains.
It should be the top of mind of everyone to protect the environment.
Right. I'd say, I would think so. This is for everybody. Right?
It is, because without water, we don't have life.
Right. That's right.
Right? We have to have clean water.
And Danny mentioned in the comments that some areas have even used these cypress trees, the knees, as a natural sort of wave break, or let me see what he says, a retaining wall, natural retaining wall, Port Orange City Center. It just sort of happened naturally. And then we've got some great resources here that people have shared. Bill shared IFAS. We have a great, you know, ag extension here with the University of Florida, ag office. We've got master naturalists. We have the Florida Native Plant Society, which I think Danny put in, fnps.org. A lot of great resources. And of course, greenvolusia.org, which is, you know, Katrina's organization. And she also put that YouTube playlist in the comments right at the beginning of our meeting. So everybody can go back and subscribe to that playlist, because the county gets certain benefits and has more flexibility with its channel if we get 100 subscribers. So that is definitely something we want to do, is subscribe to the Volusia County Environmental Management YouTube channel.
YouTube. Okay.
Yep. And let's see. So I think we one more point I want to circle back to is, Wendy, we talked to a gentleman that said that he paid $50,000 premium for his property to get at the center of his lake. He thought about it at first, and he was looking at maybe the edge of the lake, the stormwater pond, and he is so happy with his investment. For him, it was completely worth the paying that premium for his area.
Right. Yeah. He was talking about how, you know, in that whole row of houses, that the closer you got to the center, the higher the premium became. And I know that it's true too, the houses that have their backyards up against the conservation areas, they're paying a premium for those as well. Yeah, I think Buzz Nesbitt is on the call here. He sells a lot of houses in that neighborhood, and he could probably, you know, he could probably chime in and tell us what the typical premium is for, you know, for being up against those amenities. And so, yeah, it's people will pay it if they can. And I think, you know, Betsey's point is really well taken, that of course everybody wants it, but not everybody can afford it. And this is why places that, you know, developers that are trying to hit a lower price point, and, you know, maybe we'll call it affordable. I'm not really sure what counts as affordable. I'm not sure 300,000 or 250 is affordable for most people who are living on $40,000 a year. But, you know, but anyway, you know, why can't we get affordable housing that still retains some trees? I understand that it's cheaper and easier for developers to just clear the whole thing. But given, you know, if we're going with clustered development, then you can protect the areas that you're not building on. If you're doing cluster development, you can still have some preserved green spaces in the middle that you fenced off during the clearing. You know, we've seen some examples of this in development proposals recently, you know, proposals that basically, you know, commissions and planning boards had to push back on to get those features, and, you know, to sort of dig deep into our codes and our comp plans to say, hey, wait a second, you know, you're supposed to provide this when you ask for a PUD. So, you know, again, I think that it doesn't have to cost more. If you go back and find the video in the video library from Eben Bean from a couple weeks ago, Eben talked a lot about the cost savings to developers for building like this, that they actually spend less on pipes and less on paving and less on a lot of their materials cost. And so, you know, they can do it for, you know, for a higher profit margin.
Right, right. You just have to find them that have that like-minded and the big heart and the love for nature. And that's it. If it's the person that's at the top, that's writing the checks for the developing, and, you know, and most of them are very smart, and they know that's what people want. They want parks, and they want paths, and they want, you know, so you're right. It can be done. They just have to want it.
Right. So I'll just, you know, maybe to this particular audience, and Melissa Lammers has been part of this. So as Alex Zielinski, who's on the call too. Several of us who participate in the Environmental Council for Volusia and Flagler counties have been partnering with VCARD, with the Volusia County Association for Responsible Development, you know, and starting dialogues with some of the developers who are doing projects locally, you know, to try to talk about some of these principles and to talk about how, you know, this really is what everybody deserves. And, you know, at least the ones we're talking to, they get it, you know, they hear us and they understand, and they're hearing this from the market as well. And what I would like to see is that those developers set a new standard, you know, and that, you know, the market can drive this, you know, if they're if they're creating better products, you know, those will sell fast. Everything's selling fast right now, but when the sales slow down, we're going to see that those are the communities that sell out fastest. And other developers are going to look at that and go, oh, what are they doing? Maybe we should try some of that too. I mean, isn't that how a free market works? So, you know, so somebody's got to start setting those standards, and, you know, and then everybody else will get on board if that's what buyers are preferring. So, but again, realtors are an important part of that link. You all have to tell the story. You have to be that link to the buyer, and get them excited.
Well, I think we're all willing to do that, right, gang? I can see them all nodding their heads. But anyhow, and then Kelly, you were going to give us some opportunities to help out.
Yes, absolutely. So actually, I'll start. The very next opportunity is going to be tomorrow night, and we are having at 6:30. We're going to have another Zoom meeting, and it's going to be also on this low impact development umbrella topic. but we're going to be looking at green building. So we're going to have CJ Davila, who is the executive director of the Florida Green Building Coalition, Bill Catchman, who is the president of FGBC, Ralph Locke, who is the president-elect. And they're going to give us perspectives from the large statewide scale. So you can get the local government can become a green certified local government if they do certain green activities on a regular basis and they measure it and they report back on it. Neighborhoods can get a green certification. Homes can get a green certification, and stormwater management, water management gets a lot of points for green certifications. And so the very first opportunity will be another Zoom participation, and that link is on greenvolusia.org. And we're hoping to also, increase the volunteer outreach. The county has a volunteer coordinator. Katrina, do you want to talk about some of the activities that we've done in the past and maybe that are upcoming, including Explore Volusia?
Yeah, well, I actually have Christy on who can speak about some of the volunteer opportunities, if she wouldn't mind. Hey, since she's our volunteer coordinator, that was perfect.
We have several different kinds of programs. Right now, we've done some beach cleanups. We've got the Adopt a Trail program.
Wait, adopt a what?
Adopt a Trail.
Okay.
So a lot of the different conservation lands have the different hiking trails, and people or individuals or groups are able to adopt the trail, which requires going out and cleaning quarterly and reporting what's there. Also, you can mark invasive species that may be out there so that then we can come back in with land management and remove any invasive species that might be there. We do all kinds of things. We are doing a pollinator garden project coming up on Friday. So at the Lionia Environmental Center, we're going to be working in the pollinator garden, mulching, planting, all of those types of things. We look at the Adopt a Road program. We're going to be looking at that coming up next month, and then learning about what happens to trash. A whole variety. Every month we do something different for volunteer. And if there's something that people would like to do, if they have a project in mind, I can help organize volunteers to take care of it if there's something that's out there that can be done.
Great.
So, lots of opportunity.
So are you still
mentioning Christy also manages, coordinates, sorry, I should say, our Be Floridian Now program, which is our fertilizer ordinance outreach and education. So, tying back to that whole the impacts of nutrient pollution on our waterways, whether it's our surface or groundwater bodies. So we have a lot of projects going on there. And from a volunteer perspective, we've also, we're working with the community here in DeLand, Spring Hill, and we're doing some green infrastructure planting projects. And we will be reaching out to the community there to have them come and volunteer for those projects.
And you can find these where? On the county website?
Yes, so there is a page on the county website for volunteering. And we'll put the link, we can put the link in the chat.
And so greenvolusia.org, and a lot of the projects that the county does is in partnership with the universities. I know, right? So the Spring Hill program, I think you've done a lot of work with Stetson, particularly at the Boys and Girls Club, certainly, and with the Spring Hill Resource Center. And plantings. So, we're Riverside Conservancy are doing a lot of plantings that we can organize. And Manatee Watch, is the county still doing the Manatee Watch and the Scrub Jay Watch program?
Looks like Christy's unmuted, so go for it, Christy.
Oh, okay. Sure. Yes to both. Manatee Watch has a training program that you have to go through the training first, and then you learn how to be a manatee watcher. But yes, then you report the manatees that you see, you take photographs of them, and that way we can track where their migration is. So yes, that's still happening. And what was the second thing is?
The Scrub Jay Watch, Jay Watch.
Yes. that's also still happening. And that way we can track, that's together with Audubon. And we're able to track and count the scrub jays, where they're located, what their behaviors are, and combine that with national data.
Great. So your projects, you've got a lot of partners. So the coastal cleanup, that happens every September, right?
Yes, September 18th this year. It's International Coastal Cleanup. And that is done with Ocean Conservancy is the large partner with that one. But there are a lot of community partners. Each of the different coastal ways has a site captain, and that's a community leader who leads their particular site. And then these are open to the public, and the public signs up, and they are able to clean up the beach.
And
And-
so each site captain, there could be a different organization sponsoring each location, right?
Yes.
And there would be opportunities for the rivers as well as the ocean, the beach cleanup on that day?
Yes, there's both coastal as far as ocean as well as riverside. And in April, there's a different cleanup specifically for the river cleanup. That happens in April.
And that's the St. Johns River cleanup?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much. The link is, Katrina put it in the chat box. It is Volunteer Volusia is the website. And so all of the local community partners, we love partnering with Volusia County, and very much appreciate the work that Katrina does. I'm going to stop recording.